Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us on the second day of our Symposium on Democracy on Global Health. We hope you found yesterday's sessions interesting and informative and are excited and ready for day two. Before we begin, however, I'd like to remind you all to turn in your wristbands today for the I Challenge after getting 3 punches for attending symposium sessions. You can turn these in right here in the lobby of CHAMP, at the Coulter Science Center, or at the symposium office located in Washington West House. Once you turn in your first wristband, there is still time to attend 3 more sessions and turn in the second wristband and increase your chances of winning. I'd also like to announce the winner of yesterday's iTouch. That winner is Tekbir Ahmed Salah. I don't have it with me here, but you will shortly be getting an email, Mr. Lucky Winner, and you can pick it up from College Relations. Okay, I'd also like to remind everybody once again, if you have a cell phone, if you have a pager, turn it off now, please, and ideally put it away. Okay, today's first session starts off with a focus on one of the leading health problems for children around the world, that of malnutrition. Around 20 million individuals suffer from it worldwide, and it is the leading cause of death in places like India, Niger, and southern Sudan. Fortunately, the organization for which our speaker works, Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, treats these victims around the globe. Nurse Johanne Sekkenes has worked with Doctors Without Borders since 1994, when she was part of a medical surgery program set up to treat victims of the Angolan Civil War. Since then, she has delivered medical aid through the program in China, in the Congo, in Mozambique and Zaire, as well as working in the organization's office in Sweden on advocacy issues. As a program officer for Doctors Without Borders, she has participated in advocacy work on humanitarian issues with the United States government and the United Nations. Even though she holds the position today of Director of Operational Support for the organization as a whole, she still participates in overseas operations, most recently in the war-torn region of eastern Chad, and in 2008 during a nutritional crisis in southern Ethiopia. She has just returned from an emergency assignment in Burkina Faso, where she helped with response efforts to an outbreak of meningitis and measles. Ms. Sekkenes holds nursing degrees from the University of Linköping in Sweden, College of Nursing in Norway, as well as a Bachelor of Science in International Nursing and Healthcare from the Red Cross College of Nursing and Health in Sweden. It is my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to give you Johanne Sekkenes.
Hello, so my name is Johanne Sekkenes, as you heard. I'm very happy to be here for this occasion. I like your slogan, or what you want to call it, who cares? I think that's very appropriate today to say who cares about many of the issues that I see you have been discussing yesterday and today, but also on my topic today on the little children over the world that are suffering from malnutrition, various stages of malnutrition. I will give you a Doctors Without Borders perspective. I will probably be saying MSF at sometimes. That's the abbreviation of Médecins Sans Frontières. It's the same thing. It's the same organization. So let's see. Yeah, this is in Niger. I just wanted to show this picture because this was in 2005 during a major nutritional crisis in Niger in the Sahel region in Africa. And I wanted to point out also, not so much myself on the picture, but actually the nurse that is working together with me is Isiaka Abdou, who is, at that time he was local staff in Niger, very, very dedicated to the cause of fighting malnutrition in his country. Today he has gone on and is currently in Pakistan working on our emergency interventions there, not only on malnutrition, but also on war victims and so on. So I just want to say that this is not only European nurses and doctors or American nurses and doctors going overseas. This is mainly, the bulk of the work is actually done by guys like my friend Isiaka. So this is a picture from Ethiopia last year, where I assisted in another major malnutrition crisis. Then Doctors Without Borders alone treated 85,000 severely malnourished children. You see, I mean, it's 85,000, that's almost impossible to understand how many kids that is. But these kids were not even at risk. They were actually already in the severe stages of severe acute malnutrition. I'll take you through a little bit how that works, because there's different stages of malnutrition. But only these 85,000 were at immediate risk of dying. Now imagine then, if this was 85,000 at immediate risk of dying, where were all those kids that were just before in their moderate malnutrition, as we say, and what could we do about them? That is our point today. I'll come back to that. Just for you who don't know Doctors Without Borders, we are an international humanitarian medical organization. We're working in more than 60 countries. I think it's around 70 these days. We have 28,000 field positions of not only doctors and nurses. We always, me being the nurse, we always get the credit for it, but it's also, we also have other expertises as administrators, logisticians, epidemiologists, and so on. Yeah, the budget and more than 8.7 million patients in consultations in 2007 globally. This is not only for malnutrition. In all these countries that we work, we meet malnourished children in all the programs, even if it is a surgery program addressing war wounded, or if it's a tuberculosis or HIV/AIDS program, there will always be malnourished children in all those programs. The first time I was confronted with a malnourished child was when I started to work with the organization in Angola back in 94, 95. At that time, we not only did we have the surgery program, but we also had a feeding center. At that time, the limits that we faced was that we had to hospitalize all the severely malnourished children in a hospital setting, let's say. Why we had to hospitalize them was mainly because we had to feed them with therapeutic milk. That therapeutic milk we had to mix with clean drinking water, and we had to serve it as milk. And this, of course, in these poor settings, most of the mothers or the families do not have access nor to clean drinking water, nor to the wood that you need to boil the water to make it drinkable, and so on. Why we had to hospitalize them all. Now, if you think 85,000 as in Ethiopia, let's say in Angola, maybe it was not 85,000, maybe it was 12,000 or 15,000 kids that needed this assistance. Of course, it's not possible to hospitalize all those kids. It's not possible to have facilities, structures to hospitalize that many kids. So in those days, we knew that there was a lot of children that did not have access to our care. So this was mainly the limits that we faced in those days, was because the project was not feasible, it was not practical to use in an open or in a community-based setting. You can see one of the feeding centers that we set up in a gym room in one of the schools in Angola at the time. So when we worked in Angola and in other places, of course, we realized that we cannot continue like this. We need to figure out some other way to treat all these children, and also to access those children who could not be admitted to the hospitals. At the same time, there's this guy, a nutritionist back in France. He's sitting and trying to solve the same problem, because everybody was complaining. The milk is great, because that's exactly what the children need, but it's not logistically possible to deliver to all these kids. So what he figured out was, how could we make something that is ready to use and does not need clean drinking water, does not need preparation as such, that the kids can actually administer themselves to themselves, or that the mother can give it to them. This guy, André Briand, he came up with something called ready-to-use therapeutic food. And this is what it looks like. It is a paste, a peanut paste. I mean, most of you guys know peanut butter. It actually reminds me a lot of peanut butter, but it's not exactly the peanuts that is in there that is the important part of it. It is the milk powder that is added, and the micronutrients as well. And as such, these packages, with 2 of these a day, severely malnourished children can get well in about a month. Now, of course, this means that the mother the child can go home. It can be community-based or home-based care. The mother can we can just give 14 of these a week to a day to the mother, and the mother will give this to the malnourished children at home. As many of my medical colleagues were a bit resistant to this new product. Why? Because we would not be able to follow and monitor our patients as we wanted to, as we used to do. But we realized also very quickly the benefits of this project, because we could actually concentrate in those old feeding centers, hospital settings. We could hospitalize the sickest and those who really needed intensive care and really needed 24-hour surveillance by doctors and nurses. And the rest of all those 85,000, as I was talking about earlier, or those thousands and thousands of children, could be treated at home and only come in on a weekly basis to be checked on their weight and height and their evolution of gaining weight. So little by little, we were convinced actually by this benefit, and I really experienced this on a large scale in Niger, where the first picture was from. In Niger in 2005, where I was working as head of mission and medical coordinator for the organization. We did at that time have a small nutritional program going on in the southern parts of Niger. And in 2004 already, we had treated 10,000 children for severe malnutrition in the project. During the project, main objective was to treat these children and to cure them from their malnutrition, but also to figure out a good strategy, operational strategy, a good program to actually put in place this home-based care. And since I was part of this pilot project at the time, I was little by little I was convinced of the benefits of having the kids at home and not in the hospital setting with me as a nurse. Of course, the benefits are obvious, you'd say. They are at home, they're with their mother, the mother takes care of them, they're in the family setting, and very important, the mother can go on with her normal work, and for example, if this is a rural setting, she can go on with her normal work in the fields and harvest and so on. And she can also, very importantly, take care of all the other siblings. Because this was also an issue that at the time that the most affected kid would be admitted to the hospital setting, to the feeding center. But what about those 5, 6, 7 or more siblings that were sitting at home without their mother to take care of them because the mother was busy taking care of that one hospitalized? So a lot of social benefits as such, or in the family, also came with this new strategy. Not only we could treat many more kids, and so many more kids could have access to life, actually, because this is life-saving. It was also very beneficial for the mothers, and we also saw, for the mothers and the family, and we also saw that there was the defaulter rates, or the kids who left the program before they were cured, completely dropped by this. In our new strategy and our new programs, we hardly have any dropouts at all, because the mother has time to come in once a week, but she wouldn't have time to stay for 4 weeks. So this is during those, up until 2005 in Niger, we developed the program, as I was saying, and in 2005, I'd say we were pretty ready for the big influx and for the big crisis. The thing is that we didn't know that it was going to be that big. In 2005, Doctors Without Borders treated 65,000 kids, severely malnourished children, just only in that southern part of Niger. But what that showed was that it was possible to do this pilot. It was no longer a pilot. It was no longer trying to figure out how we could put this strategy, home-based care or community-based care, into place. It actually showed that it was fully possible on a large scale. So why, you'd say? I mean, on a large scale. Well, actually today, the global scope of malnutrition is, like was said earlier today, is that malnutrition is responsible for 3 to 5 million deaths per year in the under 5s age group. About 20 million children over the globe today are, as we speak, severely malnourished, at immediate risk of dying. We have calculated that only about between 5 and 10% of those children, those 20 million who actually need an adequate product to survive, have access to it today. So what we are doing is not enough. What we're doing, what other organizations are doing, Action contre la faim, or Action Against Hunger, has also adopted this not so new anymore strategy, I'd say. I mean, we've been developing this the last couple of 10, 15 years now since I've been working in this organization. And other organizations have too. Action contre la faim is one of them, Valid International, and so on. So we're not alone, but it's not enough. 10% of those 20 million kids and 3 to 5 million deaths per year in the age group up to 5, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. What else? What is the basics of why we're talking about under 5s is actually not really under 5s. That's a normal way of finding indicators in child mortality and so on. But when it comes to malnutrition, we have narrowed it down to the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable, if you want, to 6 months to 2 years of age. So why? We see very clearly in all our programs around the world, we see that there is that these are the kids that are admitted to our programs between 6 months and 2 years, and it's pretty obvious to see that 6 months normally, 6 months to 2 years is the weaning period, when the mother stops breastfeeding the child, and after 6 months, I mean, everybody will know this, there is the breast milk alone is not enough to feed this child correctly. Why? It's because during this period, it's really the window of opportunity to be able to set the development of the child for the future. It's up to 2 years. If there's damage done after that, if the child is not adequately nourished after 2 years of age, it is finished. The child will have various degrees, of course, of problems in school, of development problems, and also, of course, cost-effective to governments and so on in terms of work capacity and so on in the adult life. So the window of opportunity is really between 6 months and 2 years of age. But the children really need a diversified diet. Not only the breastfeeding, which most often stops at 6 months, but also animal protein, like milk, for example, different kinds of nutrients, and so on. And this is what these children over the world lack today. The different kinds of, the variety of the menu that these children can be given. So why, you'd say, all mothers sort of know this. And in many places in Niger in 2005, for example, not to go into the details on the causes of that crisis, but it was mentioned, at that time it was mentioned that it was a drought, and there was also a locust invasion that destroyed the crops. That was simply not true. The problem was that the prices of the food skyrocketed. So the mothers, the poor mothers in a nation like Niger, which is one of the poorest, if not the poorest on the UN list, countries in the world, of course they couldn't afford the food anymore, and they can't afford the milk anymore, or animal proteins, or an egg or once in a while. So what do the kids eat? They eat, it can be millet or rice in other settings. I mean, in Southeast Asia and so on, there's more rice. And that is simply not enough for these children, although they might have enough in volume, but it's the quality that we're talking about. So what to do? Well, we can of course supply them with this and treat them with this. The severely malnourished kids, we can treat them with this. But then of course this is expensive, and that is also the problem with the donors and the program people in, for example, USAID, who have the money constraints on this, which we do too, but that's another issue, because we realize that we have to, when we have a product like this, the children has to have access to it, and we have to provide it, and that's that's just what we have to do. When it comes to governments, different donor governments, I'm talking of the United States, of course, because we are in the United States, but it's the same in Norway, where I come from, or in France, and so on. They have to shift their thinking in programming, not only programming of food security programs and so on. All food security programs have to include also the correct and adequate treatment of these malnourished children. If not, the food security will not be achieved. That's easy. And they also have to shift the kind of donations that they are giving. To go back to Niger in 2005, when we realized that this was possible on a large scale, we started to advocate for these new types of programs and these new types of products. This picture shows Dr. Milton, who was one of the four figures in advocating for better, more funding, better programs, and also adequate, really sending the right kind of foodstuffs to what we call the malnutrition hotspots, which I'll come back to later. This specific picture is CNN. They came to Niger when we were there, and they also helped a lot in passing the message on by not only documenting the crisis of 2005, but also following up later with a program on 60 Minutes, talking about these issues. And of course, that's what we need. So we continue to do this, not only after the Niger crisis, which was an acute crisis, but also now, and this is also one of the reasons why I'm here today, we also continue to advocate, but we also go to Washington and talk to USAID there specifically. So I talked about the increased funding for treatment. The US government is one of the biggest funders. I think it's US government fund 50% of the World Food Program over the world. So of course, we need to talk to the US government about these issues. 50% is great, that we're not complaining about that. And even, we're not complaining about, I mean, it's not really our business to tell the US government where to put the money. But if some of those 50% of the financing that goes to the World Food Program could shift over to these kind of projects and also to treatment programs for the kids, then that is our point. And this is what we're trying to convince the USAID and the US government today. In Niger, when I was there in specifically in 2005, as I said, those 63,000 kids, they were severely malnourished, like this little kid or the other one that you saw that looked even worse than this one. And me, as a nurse there, and my colleagues, doctors, and Isiaka, as you saw earlier, we were saying, but why do these kids have to become this bad before we take care of them? And we had huge discussions about this. Why can we not do something earlier about these kids? That is the big question now. I mean, we are doctors and nurses. We're very, very good at treating these kids, medically speaking, and saving their lives, and many times not saving their lives because they're too far beyond saving. But why does this have to happen? Why can we not find some kind of prevention to this problem? So the follow-up of the 2005 crisis in Niger was that in 2006, when I was still there, we started a new pilot in trying to treat, and we decided to distribute this kind of supplemental food to the areas or the regions or the communes that were the worst affected, that had most kids coming from that. So one of the places was Gidamwonji in Niger. And we started to distribute to all the kids there, sick or not, once a week. I'll show you a few pictures of that because that was very interesting. This is just to illustrate the market in Niger at the time, full of food, but it's not the right food for the kids and it's too expensive for the mothers. So in any case, it's not accessible for the kids, and this food will not be the right food, the millet and the rice and so on. Yes, and this is also, I just have to mention also that in these malnutrition hotspots, as we call them, the Sahel region, the Asian region, the Southeast Asian region, the Horn of Africa and so on, this is not necessarily emergency setting. So you'd say, so why is MSF there? Well, MSF generally goes, or Doctors Without Borders generally goes, where there's a high mortality and where there's an emergency. It could be a medical emergency, but not necessarily an emergency in that specific country. But the emergency occurs generally during the hunger gap. So it's not even during the whole year. It's during the so-called hunger gap, just before, the couple of months just before the next harvest. And then you'll say, yeah, but you just said that the harvest was not good for the small kids between 6 years and 6 months and 2 years. And no, of course, but if you have a good harvest, you can sell that and then you can buy milk for the kids and then you're good to go basically and the kids will be fine. But if the harvests are not good, or if the prices are too high, then of course the families will not have enough money to buy the adequate foods for those kids. So the hunger gap is this seasonal, this is where we also saw, it took us time, you have to have a program going like that for years to see when there's a peak in malnutrition, when there's many more kids coming into your nutrition centers every year, you see, there's something here. Why is this happening only during these months? And of course, the mothers knew. The mothers knew. I had a chat with a lot of mothers during those years to understand what was actually going on. And the mothers know very well that the months before the harvest, we don't have any money left, we don't have any food left. And so, of course, I can't give my kids the egg, the glass of milk a day, and so on that she needs. Just after harvest, I have money and I'll buy that, and I know that's what the kids need. So ask the mothers and you're good to go. You know what you should implement in the program. So that's exactly what we did. Then after 2005, in 2006 and 2007, during that famous hunger gap, we distributed to all the kids, sick or not sick. Actually, the sick we put into the program and treated them for whatever kind of, if they were sick, malaria, diarrhea, or other, and also for the malnutrition. And those who were not sick, they were enrolled in this blanket distribution with supplemental ready-to-use foods. Now, those ready-to-use foods that we use for the prevention of malnutrition is slightly different. It's not as dense, nutrient dense as this one is for the treatment. And you need much less of it. So this is a distribution in Niger. You see he's giving the mother 4 pots like this, and that's the ration for a month that she needs. She will put 3 tablespoons of this ready-to-use supplemental food, which contains the essential nutrients. It contains the milk, and it contains also this peanut butter I was talking about to keep it together and to give it a little bit of flavor. And she puts 3 tablespoons of that, mixes it with the millet or with the rice or whatever kind of staple food that she can give the kids. And we saw, there was a study made on these children, and we saw that the seasonal peak in malnutrition that had happened every year before did not happen. This study has been published in the JAMA, and we are now trying to promote prevention also. Of course, treatment has to be there because there will always be severely malnourished children to treat, but we are also trying to address the prevention part of this program with these kinds of food stuff and distributing them. What is needed now, I'm coming back to what is really needed to get this going, because we are doing it, you'll say 60, 70, 80,000 children a year, but that's really small scale. So what is needed is that international funders and donors and governments have talks with the governments in these countries to actually and also promote implementing these kind of prevention programs that could be implemented by Ministers of Health and so on. So this is what we are trying to make this kind of shift in the programming of how can I say, of technical help to these governments. I mean, many of the governments know they need the money and they need the technical help to actually implement these strategies. So this is where you can see, this is from the JAMA study, as we call it, is how the peak, the seasonal peak, actually was reduced, dramatically reduced, when we started to distribute the RUSF, supplementary feeding products, which is not exactly the same as this, but you need less of it because the kids are still not malnourished. We call this the Nutritional Safety Net. One good example of a nutrition safety net that has worked very well is the WIC, or the Women, Infant and Children program here in the United States. We realized in the United States that vulnerable women, children and infants need supplementary foodstuffs, whatever kind that might be that has been given here. It always has contained milk or milk products or animal protein products. And this is what is lacking in the food that the US and other governments are sending and using to prevent malnutrition in developing countries. This is a kind of substandard that is not acceptable. In our safety net program in the United States and in other places, in Mexico, in Sri Lanka, there's also been a program that has worked pretty well. Milk product and animal proteins have been added to those programs and safety net programs, and have been very successful even in poor settings, not as a rich country as the United States. So why do we not insist on this being done also in developing countries? It's a substandard. What do we send then, you ask me? This is to illustrate all the different programs and different safety net programs that are being sent to the development countries, and also the food security programs that are already implemented and running pretty well, except for this age group. Now, what we send is the so-called corn-soya blend. And the corn-soya blend is great, but not for these kids. It's great for you, for me. We can live on that our whole life, every day, no problem. It's very good. There's been nutrients added and so on, but what is missing in there? There's no milk. It says it, corn, soya blend. There's no milk, there's no animal protein in there. And above all, it needs also cooking to be eaten. So it needs firewood. We go back to the same, what I started with. It needs firewood to prepare it. You need cooking oil to prepare it as well. And it's simply not the right foodstuff for these little children. But in all kind of safety net programs today, this is what is being used, and this is what's being sent from the US and other governments. In Europe, it's called Unimix. Here it's called CSB, corn soya blend, but it's the same thing. So this is what we're trying to change this, but only for this age group. I mean, for the rest, of course, food programs and food aid has to continue, and the US has to continue to be such a good donor on those programs. But we have to shift a little bit for the smallest children, and then adapt food aids to need. That is the third point in what we're working on today. I talked about it already, that the children need to have the animal proteins and milk and so on. So this is mainly the hotspots in the world. I prefer not to say hotspots. It sounds like it's an emergency. As I said earlier, many of these countries or these areas or regions are actually not sort of classical emergency settings. It is more development settings, and it's this recurrent every year during the hunger gap. It comes back, and it's not considered as classical emergency settings. And this is the famous before and after picture. It's the same little boy. I met him in Niger, and I mean him and all those other children that are actually cured. I didn't talk about the cured rates that we have in these programs. They are hovering around 95% of the kids admitted to the programs are actually cured. And then of course, there's around 1% death, and around the other percentages are defaulters or people who leave the program and so on, or transferred to other facilities and so on. But this is what we're looking for. We need the activists for this issue. These little children, they don't talk, and they can't talk for themselves. And this is why Doctors Without Borders has taken on the malnutrition as an advocacy issue, or trying to mobilize more activists on convincing governments around the world. just like the HIV/AIDS activists did with access to treatment of antiretrovirals in those days, and it actually did work. But we do not see this happen for these small malnourished children. And of course, the small children cannot talk for themselves, the mothers are poor, etc. So someone has to be activist for them. I would like to have a discussion, questions, and so on. It's always easier to discuss these issues than to stand here and talk about them myself. So please, any questions about specifically the malnutrition, the global malnutrition crisis, Doctors Without Borders, or things like that?
Hi. You said earlier that the U.S. was sending corn syrup or something, and
corn soya blend.
Corn soya blend. Why would they continue to send it if it's not exactly good? Well, I mean, it's good, but doesn't satisfy the requirements of certain kids.
Yeah. Of all kids between 6 months and 2 years, actually, it doesn't. Right. You know what? The history of the corn soya blend, I don't know it all, but I know a part of it is that it used to contain milk. It used to contain milk powder until the 80s, when there was some kind of crisis in the dairy production, I think, in the US. And so they took, and it became more expensive to put the milk powder in this corn soya blend. It's not corn syrup, it's corn soya blend. It's like a type of flour that you mix, that is a mix between corn flour and soya, and then you also, when you prepare it, you have to heat it up and you have to prepare it with oil. So you have to also ship out the oil, and you also have to heat it up, and when you heat it up, many of the micronutrients in there will be destroyed by the heat. So this is also a problem. So back to the history of the milk powder in there, it was taken out for obvious reasons, and I fully understand those reasons, out of the corn soya blend, but we continued to send it as part of the food aid, and it's continued to be the recommended food in all these safety nets that I was talking about, all these food security programs that are being implemented in many of the, if not to say most of the developing countries. It continues to be the product of choice because evidence has not come out yet, because it takes time to change these kind of protocols or this kind of, and then of course there's also political side to it. Of course, there's a lot of corn being grown in the United States, and there's also all these foreign policies that are set that part of the food aid is not supposed to be money, it's supposed to be products grown in the United States, and so on and so on. So there's a whole range of reasons, better and not very good reasons, if you ask me, to why we continue to send it out. The UN, for example, the UNICEF and the World Food Program, they have now, 2007, they came out with recommendations, finally, I would say, because we had been bugging them for many, many years already, to change their, already at the treatment for the severely malnourished. When it comes to prevention, where the corn soya blend comes in, and the safety nets, we're not there yet.
Hi. I got two questions. The first one is, I would like to know what drives you or what motivates you to do this kind of work. And the second one is, the safety net, the food safety nets. Is it a long-term or short-term strategy to the solution to this problem of malnutrition? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, what drives me to do this kind of work? I mean, for me, it's pretty obvious. I am a nurse, and I can actually do something on site. It's true that today I am based in the New York office of Doctors Without Borders, but I work a lot still. I go and give a lot of support, operational support, to the teams in the different fields with my experience and so on from previous work. And I think that for me, it's a humanitarian work, and for me, that's what works, you know. And we have to be. It's also part of solidarity with not only these kids, but these kids have been part of my sort of life for so long now. So mainly it's me. I feel that I'm sort of their spokesperson. They can't speak. I mean, I've seen them. I've seen them die. I've seen them get well. I've seen them, you know, I've seen their mothers, the families in their houses and so on. So that's motivation. Now, the second question of the safety nets, of course this is long term. Of course this is development. So you'd say, but so why is MSF getting involved in that? Because Doctors Without Borders is, as I said earlier, an emergency organization, a medical organization. Well, I talked a little bit about it. It was so frustrating to sit there in these feeding centers and see all these literally dying kids, little skeletons, come in when we knew that in my country this doesn't happen because we have safety nets. In the US it doesn't happen because we have safety nets for the vulnerable pregnant women and children. So why did this have to happen? Why can we not prevent this, and why can we not start earlier? I can tell you that it was a big discussion internally in Doctors Without Borders, and we were saying just this. This is not our area. We cannot go and start doing development because we don't know how to do that. But we could actually do, we said that, but in any case, it is prevention, it is development. Those kind of safety nets has to be implemented, not by humanitarian emergency organizations like us, but by governments and by their supporters, their donors and so on. And the technical supply has to come as well. So of course this is long term, of course this is development, but it has to start somewhere.
I wonder if you could share with us some numbers about how many volunteers are working with Doctors Without Borders, and secondly, you have a large group of people here interested. What can the average person do to help your cause? Yeah.
So how many volunteers do we have? Well, we have 28,000 of us working all over the world, right? And in the emergency settings, not counting the office people like myself today. Volunteers, overseas volunteers, it's about 2,500 who go from the US, from all over Europe, from also many of the African countries, and many former local staff, as we say, like Isiaka Abdou. He's now an emergency coordinator in Pakistan as we speak, for example, and helping out there. So there's a lot of people from all over the world. I think we have actually, there's not one nation that is not represented in our staff, so that's pretty interesting. Yeah, so that's one way to contribute. Of course, this is the way I do it. But then, of course, I didn't talk so much about Doctors Without Borders. It was not my subject today, but how we are funded and so on. But of course, this costs money. I mean, it's only natural. This is emergency interventions, high tech, because that's also one of our our philosophies, or one of our goals is high quality. That quality should not be less than we can get here. It will be, because of lack of money. So of course, my answer to you is, of course, we live on people like you guys. That's how we can run our programs. That's how why? Because we do not take government money. We do not take donations from the US government for political reasons. Being a non-political, non-religious organization, we take standpoint and say, but for political reasons, we will not take money for example, from the United States government. The perfect example is Afghanistan, Pakistan. We cannot say that we are an independent humanitarian organization, an NGO, non-governmental organization. We cannot say that and be working in Afghanistan or Pakistan, and be funded by the United States government. That's not possible. It's just not possible. I mean, it's as easy as that. And I've seen that also when I've been working in different places around the world, that people will say that you are coming from the occupying government and you're financed by them. So of course, you are just an extended arm from them. And I said, no, we're financed by private donors. That's not fully true. Huh? We have like 85% of our finance or our money comes from private donors, and the rest comes from different governments, but not the United States, not the French government, not those governments who are very many times involved in one way or the other in the problems in those countries. So we take, for example, from Norway, my country, from some small amounts from the Swedish government as well, and from ECHO, the European Union, and so on. That can be discussed, of course, further. But as long as we say we stay at 85% of our finances being private, and the United States is the Americans are our biggest donors.
Johanna, thank you very much for that interesting and informative talk.